there, my name is Alexa. Thanks for clicking on this video, and you can probably tell from the title, but today I'll be talking about the topic is how I moved to New York City. Specifically, this is like my budgeting edition, so how much it cost me and what I saved to move here. I'll probably make more videos about New York City, like lifestyle in the future, but this is my first one, and I think, well, if you're watching this, you're probably someone who wants to move here, so I think this will be very helpful, especially if you're just an average person like me. So, let's get into it. I'll start with a bit of context about myself. So, I moved to New York City from across the country. The state is irrelevant, that's all you need to know. In July 2021, and I really love it. I live in Queens, and I think it's a great borough, and there's lots of great places to visit. And it's just great being in the city, and I really love it, and I do not have regrets about moving here. That might change in the future, who knows, but for now, I'm really happy about it. I didn't know that I always wanted to live in New York City, but I knew that I definitely didn't want to stay in my hometown, and I definitely didn't want to stay in my home state. So, it all started when I visited my friend when I was in college. She was living in New York at the time, and I visited her, and I fell in love. All the things to do, all the yummy food that you can eat, it was just amazing, and from that moment on, I was like, okay, I am gonna live here. So, what do I do? Well, the answer is research, so that's what I did. I read a lot of articles, and of course, I watched a lot of vlogs, New York City vloggers. I think nowadays the content is more varied and you can find a lot more helpful content. There's a lot more of it. But I would say 3 years ago, which is when this first started, I couldn't find a lot of stuff that I thought was relevant. A lot of the information or the videos you would find on moving to New York were like NYU students or people with rich parents helping them, move here and pay for it. And no hate on that. In fact, I'm jealous. Another type would be like influencers, and I don't want to hit on that either, but that's their job, so of course it's supposed to be glamorous and probably out of my reach, so it felt kind of unattainable at the time. That's why I'm making this video, because I feel like it'll help anyone who wants to move here, and I think when I show how much I spent, you'll kind of see like it is possible and it is expensive, but you probably already know that if you're planning on moving here. So, let's get into it, and you'll see it is attainable. It just takes a lot of patience. So, how I saved. Because of my various research and now my experience, I would say a good amount to save is $10,000. And I'm not the only one to say that. I'm pretty sure there's a Sarah Funky video out there where she goes into this topic and she says 10,000 is a good amount. And honestly, I remember the first time I watched that, I was like, how? Now I get it. I understand. I understand why it's $10,000. So I'll break that down and you'll see why, but that's what I decided to save as a minimum. It took me a little less than 3 years, but I started when I was in college, so I was only working part-time, so I could really only save so much. In fact, I would barely say I was saving, but I did what I could. And then I graduated from college, and I didn't really have a lot of responsibilities, so I was able to work full-time, I don't have any kids because I went to community college and a state school. I didn't have a lot of student debt, so I was able to save a lot more, and I ended up saving like hundreds of dollars each month into my savings account, and I saw that balance go up. What I would recommend, and this is not sponsored, but I use the Mint budgeting app, and they let you set savings goals, and that's what I did. So anytime I put a certain amount towards that savings, I would see that balance go up, and it was, it's a nice reward to see that go up. And I remember when I finally hit the 10,000 mark, there was like confetti. I don't know if they still do that, but I saw that and I was like, oh my god, I could do this now if I wanted. That didn't happen, but I at least had that much saved. So that's what I did. I also want to acknowledge that I am privileged because I was able to go to school and I graduated. And I also want to say, I think this is relevant now more than ever, but throughout the pandemic, I was able to keep my job and I never got laid off or furloughed. Yeah, that's the word, furloughed. So I was very fortunate in that sense. I didn't have to worry about a lot of things that other people who lost their jobs did. Now, this is the juicy part, getting into what I actually spent. This is interesting. I went through all my bank statements and I also went through the budgeting apps to see how things were categorized, and you'll see how much I spent and I'll show you a total at the end. So, to move here, I decided to fly. I did not want to drive because that would have been like, I don't know, 2,500 miles of driving, plus I didn't want to take my car, and so I basically sold all my furniture and I booked a one-way flight like a month and a half in advance. Flew with 2 checked bags and obviously, you know, the personal item, the carry-on, and I got to the airport. That cost me $217.20. Then, when I was at the airport, I got there at 6 a.m. because I flew on a red-eye, screaming baby all flight. It was terrible. But I was there. So I took a Lyft because, you know, I had 2 50-pound bags. No way was I going to try to figure out how to navigate public transport. Or I didn't have the patience to try and find a taxi, so I just took a Lyft to where I needed to go, and that was one of the most expensive Lyfts in my life, $71.93. Would not recommend, but, you know, it is what it is. Convenience, that's what you're paying for, honestly. Then, because of the uncertainty, my initial plan when I was going to move here was to stay in an Airbnb for 2 weeks and try to find an apartment. So it ended up being that we technically didn't need it because we were able to get approved for an apartment before we were even there physically, but we still stayed in the Airbnb for 2 weeks, and I also want to point out that I have 2 other roommates, so from now on you'll see how a lot of the costs are split between 3 people. So in that case, the 2-week Airbnb was $1,314, split by 3, so that's $438 each. I have these numbers written down because there's no way I can remember all that. Of course, like I said, we got approved for an apartment before we were even physically there, and honestly, I would not recommend that to most people, but in our case, it worked out. And I'll make a video about this in the future, but there are a lot of fees associated with apartments, but here's what I did, or here's how I broke it down. So when you're applying, there's always an application fee, and it's always $20. Unless the law has changed, it's always $20, and if it's not, that's suspicious. You might be getting scammed. Next is the broker's fee. Now, when you're looking for apartments in New York City, you might not need a broker's fee, but a lot of listings usually have broker's fees. So the broker's fee was $2,400, split between 3 people, so that's $800. Next, we had the first month's rent and the security deposit. So that was $5,800, split between 3 people, so that's $1,933.34. That's kind of hefty, so that's what I spent there. I said earlier that I sold basically all my furniture, but I didn't get rid of everything. So, for example, I had a bunch of winter clothes and hobby stuff like my art supplies that I still needed to get over here. So what I did is I got like 5 big, like this size boxes. Oh my god. That was the mic. That's gonna be terrible. But anyways, what I did is I got 5 big boxes like this, and I filled them. They were each like 20, 30 pounds each, shipped them to my address, and I had them all here. That was $415. I don't know, there's probably a cheaper way to do that, but I just didn't want to deal with it. So, there it is. I spent $415 shipping stuff here. Lastly, you're in the apartment. There's, you know, you gotta buy furniture and stuff. I was lucky in that my roommates are my friends, yes. They were shipping a lot of their stuff in a pod, so we would have a lot of furniture, but obviously I had nothing. I was starting completely new. So you'll see this is like a lump sum of split expenses of like essentials plus my furniture costs. So, you know, whether that's like a plunger, dishes, cooking like spices, things you don't even think about, cleaning supplies. So that lump sum ended up being $3,550.05. So yeah, that was painful, but I have a really nice bed now, and it's very comfy and cozy, and I have adult sheets. I'm an adult grown woman, so that was nice. In total, if I sum up everything that I just read off to you here, I spent $7,425.32. Now that does not even include the hundreds, honestly no, not just hundreds, thousands of dollars I spent on food and alcohol since when I moved in, like that first month or so, because we didn't have a kitchen. You learn if you move here that food and drink is really expensive, but you know, that's part of what it's like to live in a big city. So That's why I would say 10,000 is a good place to start, especially if you don't want to be too stressed about money. I also want to say it took me a month to get a job here, so you might have a job before, you might have a job after, but it's not impossible to find a job here. In fact, I would say right now in the current job market, it's probably pretty easy. In fact, I'm unemployed right now and I just started searching for a job again, but I'm sure I'll find something. I'm not really stressed about that. So, yeah. Essentially, I think if you want to move here, I would try to answer these questions. Why do you want to move to New York City? When or how soon do you want to move here? Are you planning to have a job beforehand, or are you going to try to find work while you're there? Or once you're there, I mean. And do you have enough of a savings balance, or are you going to get financial help from someone? If not, how much would you be willing to save, and how long are you willing to save for? Are you going to start fresh when it comes to furniture, or will you bring a lot of stuff from where you currently live? I believe once you have those questions answered, I think you can figure it out for yourself, basically. I can't really tell you what to do, but I think by providing these numbers, it's easier to provide like a frame of reference for people who don't really know how expensive it is to move to New York City. There are just so many factors that affect how much it's going to cost, and while there's no 100% set number, I would say that 10,000 is a good amount if you want to be comfortable. It's very easy to spend more, and I'm sure you could do it with less. I hope you found this video helpful, and of course, if you have any sort of questions, feel free to leave any comments, leave comments about them if you do, and I'll answer them to the best of my abilities. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I feel so corny saying this, but since this is my first time doing it, I gotta say it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll figure out if that's better to say at the beginning or the end. But I will make sure to make more content. If anyone has any suggestions, please let me know and I'll work on them as best as I can because I am a complete beginner. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video and have a good day. Bye! Cheers. This is tea.